Do you regret buying yourself a lady's watch? So posited Mrs. Watch Enthusiast London late one evening, just as we were about to turn in. My wife was referring to a watch I'd bought myself in November 2024, a Patek Philippe Calatrava Pilot Travel Time. And the reason she referred to it as a lady's watch is because, on seeing the watch for the first time, she immediately clocked it as being a watch that was, in her view, designed for the feminine wrist. This particular version of the Calatrava Pilot Travel Time is the smaller sibling of an otherwise identical but larger reference of the same watch. Mine has a 37.5mm diameter case, as opposed to the larger iteration, which has a 42mm case. I paused momentarily before answering her directly, not because I wasn't sure of my answer, but because her question jarred with me, and I was sort of caught off balance as to why it even mattered. My immediate reaction was to feel defensive. Silly, really. But in a sense, and perhaps this is just me, her comment felt somehow like a direct challenge on my manliness. The ridiculous insinuation being that a smaller wristwatch somehow makes me less manly. Ridiculous insinuation, and yet here I am sharing this and discussing it with you. In truth, I surprised myself. It was a rather odd feeling, not least because this was a private moment which, until now, was shared only between husband and wife. There was no audience, no one else was involved. So it was a bit strange that I might feel this way and somehow insulted. My wife wasn't teasing me. She wasn't trying to poke fun or goad me in any way. It was a straight question, and it was casually delivered in passing, shortly before lights out. As ever, Mrs. Watch Enthusiast London is, of course, right, in a way. At least she was once. This reference, the 7234G, was initially marketed by Patek Philippe as a ladies' watch, being launched 5 years after the larger 5524G. It was clear within the promotional literature at the time that Patek was seeking to appeal directly to the ladies' market, assuring a confident presence on a feminine wrist. It was a short production run. The 7234G was introduced in September 2020 and phased out in 2024, so I can only imagine that it can't have had much take-up. However, the larger 5524G is still very much currently available to purchase. And as I think about it, the ladies' watch advertising and marketing may well bear much of the responsibility and blame for poor sales, because few men are likely to set out to buy a ladies' watch for themselves. But is it really a ladies' watch? Straight away I'm reminded of the classic Rolex Explorer Mark I, which historically had a 36mm case diameter, considered large at the time of launch, and which is now once again available in the 36mm diameter case size. Sure, I know women who love to wear that watch, but I also know plenty of men that do too, and I feel quite certain that the vast majority of the buyers of this watch are men. And I also recall when I first saw my elderly neighbour's Patek Philippe Nautilus, what struck me about his watch was that it was a noticeably smaller case size. In fact, I'd never seen a Nautilus that was smaller than the modern ones today, 40mm case diameters. And so I remarked on it. He and I discussed the fact that he much preferred the smaller watch to the more modern sizes of today. I still don't know what case size it was, but it was clearly and obviously a much smaller case size. Regardless, it didn't look feminine to me. I suppose what I'm saying is, I don't believe that the case diameter is really the issue here. What I think was the issue, and it's something that my wife clocked straight away, and which I believe may have irretrievably influenced her opinion, was the original strap, which tapered down from 18mm at the lugs to just 14mm at the buckle. That's both a dramatic tapering and a small measurement at the buckle, all things considered. Initially, wearing the watch with its original strap and buckle did feel a bit dainty, and dare I say it, a little bit feminine. It wasn't the first time my wife has commented on the size of the watch on my wrist. My Jaeger-LeCoultre medium duo face small seconds was the first watch Mrs. Watch Enthusiast London felt was too small for my wrist. She has since commandeered my Reverso and tends to wear it far more than I do these days. She wears it well, and I'm happy she enjoys it. We haven't yet clashed or haggled over who gets to wear it. Yet. This watch was one of the first of what I consider to be the smaller watches that I've bought for myself. I've talked before about my shift to smaller watches previously, which started to occur in 2020. Personally, I still don't consider my Reverso to be too small for my wrist. Of course, it's all a matter of opinion, although rectangular watches like this do wear differently to round ones. As an aside, thank you to those of you who responded to my Instagram post about this watch, confirming that it's not too small after all. Regardless, my wife believes it is a bit too small for me, which in part could be because she wishes to wear the Reverso herself, but I think is probably more likely a reflection of her wish for me to present in a way that she wants her husband to look. I have since tried to better understand her view on my Patek ladies' watch. Basically, she describes it as an ick, which I understand is her way of saying it's a turn-off. It's not a colour thing. For example, me wearing pink is in her eyes fine. It's more about how it looks on me and the fact that it's too small. She doesn't want to see her husband wearing a feminine watch or looking feminine. The Piaget that my father gave me, which is another popular choice for Mrs. Watch Enthusiast London, is in her view also too small for me. And I happen to agree regarding this watch. Whenever I wear it, I feel that it's just a little bit too slender. It's a look. Similarly, with the Vacheron Constantin, although again, these watches hark back to the 1970s when it was fashionable for men to wear smaller watches. I've run through the 36mm diameter Rolex Explorer logic past her, and Mrs. Watch Enthusiast London maintains that the technical specifications regarding size is irrelevant. She maintains that it just doesn't look right. Because it's a woman's watch. It's designed for a woman, she says. I can see it a mile off. By way of further explanation, she explains that you can see straight away whether a picture on a wall is hung right. And in her view, the way a man's shirt buttons up is different from how a lady's shirt buttons up. And despite the fact that she thinks a woman can break these rules, she nevertheless likes a man to adhere to them. As I mentioned, the strap and 14mm buckle appearance was pretty dainty, so after having bought the watch, I decided to change the watch strap. As I say, on the original strap, the taper narrows down from 18mm at the lugs to 14mm at the buckle. And in context, when I consider my other watches, many of my Bremonts measure 22mm at the lugs and taper down to 20mm at the buckle. For example, my 10th anniversary Bremont watch and my MBs. The right flyer goes from 22mm to 20, the 10th anniversary goes from 22 to 20, and my MB2, 22 to 20. Other, slightly smaller watches that I own taper down from 20mm at the lug to an 18mm buckle. For example, the Bremont Hawking goes from 20mm to 18, the Longitude 20mm to 18, and my Zeitwerk 20mm down to 18 at the buckle. And there are some in-betweeners, such as the Master Control Date that I own, which measures 19mm at the lugs and 17mm at the buckle. My Grand Seiko SBGY003 has a similar measurement. But all in all, a 2mm taper appears to be reasonably consistent across my collection at least, and in my humble opinion, looks good. I believe it works to provide an element of sophistication, Some watch straps and some bracelets don't taper at all, and I think they can look a bit clunky. The one exception in my collection is my Lange Sohne, which also has a 4mm taper, from 20mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the buckle. For some reason, and perhaps it's the slightly larger starting point and end point in this setup, this looks good to me. Ultimately, I concluded that the 4mm taper on my Calatrava Pilot travel time was a bit too severe on this watch, that the strap was just that little bit too narrow at the buckle, and that the buckle was simply too small for my liking. All three of these things combined work to give off a more feminine appearance. Arguably, the smaller 18mm lugs are also a contributing factor. However, I don't believe the Saxonia Thin has a feminine appearance in spite of its 18mm lug width and its 2mm taper to a 16mm buckle. So I went to Patek in Bond Street to see whether I could buy a larger matching strap that tapered down from 18mm to 16mm, along with a 16mm white gold buckle. At Patek, down in the basement, I shared my thoughts and discussed the whole woman's watch issue with Alicia, the lady who was assigned to help me. She listened to my story and was at pains to tell me that this wasn't a woman's watch, despite me sharing my wife's view. And straight-faced, she explained very earnestly that it's just a smaller iteration of the larger 55-24G. So I reminded her of the marketing materials Patek used at the time of the launch, and she explained how Patek had since moved away from positioning their watches as gentlemen or ladies' watches. Alicia then walked me to the opening in the display window that looks into the watchmaker's area, next to where we were sitting, and called over her watchmaker colleague before passing my watch through the hatch to him. On taking my watch in hand and looking at it, like night follows day, he remarked out loud, "Ah, this is the ladies' version of the 55-24G." I looked back at Alicia next to me and grinned. "You see," I blurted out in laughter. Alicia didn't let her guard slip, and she remained in earnest mode, simply repeating what she had already told me earlier. The new strap and 16mm buckle took several weeks to arrive, and during that time I continued to wear the Calatrava Pilot on the 14mm buckle. A lot. And I have to tell you that I got used to it. Whenever I would switch to wearing my larger watches and then back again, the tapered strap and 14mm buckle suddenly felt and looked small all over again. But so much of this is what you're used to, and of course, how you feel about it. And then, initially when I had made the switch to the more gently tapering strap and buckle, I quietly wondered to myself whether the strap tapered sufficiently and if the buckle looked too big. The new white gold buckle was identical, only bigger. However, the strap, whilst being a matching colour, was not completely the same. It lacks the white crosshatch stitching that forms a cross within the square, you can see it here, which gives it a unique, symmetrical and intentional design, suggesting a high level of artisanal work. However, it really doesn't trouble me that this detail is missing from the newer strap. You can't see it anyway when the watch is being worn, and it was far more important to me that the strap and buckle were changed to be slightly larger. I have again shared since then my musings on this with Mrs. Watch Enthusiast London and shown her how the watch looks with a thicker strap and a bigger buckle. In her view, it doesn't matter, and it makes no difference. "It's a woman's watch," she says, before following up with a grin, "and the sooner you hand it over to me, the better." In final analysis, we have a difference of opinion, and it's one of those situations where I think we must agree to disagree. Recently, on a trip away for an event, my wife looked at what I was wearing shortly before I left and noticed the Calatrava Pilot travel time on my wrist. "Oh," she remarked, "you're taking your lady's watch." Ultimately, my position on this is that I don't regard this as being a lady's watch, in spite of its genesis at Patek. It's not veering into the men wearing nail polish territory. And in much the same way, I don't regard myself as being feminine simply because my wrists are smaller than the average male's. Sure, I changed the original strap and buckle, but at the end of the day, I very much regard my Patek Calatrava Pilot Travel Time as being a smaller iteration of its larger sibling, and it's better suited to me. Indeed, this watch has quickly become a firm favourite of mine, and it's one of the first watches I'd likely reach for on a rescue mission if my house was on fire. Net-net, given everything I've just said and shared with you, it won't come as a surprise to you to know how I answered my wife when she asked me whether I regretted buying myself the Patek Calatrava Pilot. Not a bit of it.